Your headlights don't just reveal the road, they invite what hides beyond mile markers that shouldn't exist. 5 true nightmares where asphalt becomes a hunting ground. A trucker trapped between mile 47 and 48 with a screaming thing in his cab, a paramedic's backseat occupied by a clawed hollow passenger. An exit leading to a town that flickers like a dying film reel, a courier stalked by a man who knows his name, and a rideshare picking up something that speaks in glitched tongues. Did something follow you home from your last night drive?
There's a stretch of highway in northern Pennsylvania that's rarely used after sunset. Most locals avoid it altogether, especially between mile markers 47 and 48. No one really talks about why. They just shrug and take the long way around. But if you ask the older folks in the area, they'll get quiet, shake their heads, and mutter something about the screaming thing. In 2018, a man named Mark Clayborne, a 38-year-old long-haul trucker from Indiana, decided to take that road despite the warnings. He was making a delivery to Buffalo, running behind schedule, and his GPS rerouted him down the lesser-known stretch to make up time. It was about 1:45 a.m. when he hit mile marker 47. Mark recalled the moment everything changed. The night had already been eerily quiet, the trees flanking the road unnaturally still. But at 1:47 a.m., his radio, a solid CB unit he'd had for years, started emitting a high-pitched, garbled whine. It wasn't static. It sounded like whispers played backward, then a low, pulsating hum layered beneath it, like an underwater generator churning miles below the ocean's surface. He reached for the dial when the truck's headlights flickered, just for a second. But in that moment, something darted across the road. He slammed the brakes. It wasn't a deer, not even close. Mark described it later as a tall, bent figure, almost humanoid, but way too thin. Its joints were wrong, and it moved like it was stuck in fast forward. He only saw it for half a second, but that half second etched itself into his memory. He tried to restart the truck. The engine sputtered twice before finally catching. As he inched forward, scanning the woods with his high beams, the radio fell silent. Then, a sound, a clicking like bones tapping glass, began emanating from the speakers. Then came a voice, but not a human voice. It was layered, 3 voices speaking at once, all different tones and pitches. One high, almost childlike, one low, almost too low, and a third voice that sounded like it was vibrating through metal. The words were unintelligible at first, then suddenly clear. "You shouldn't be here." He turned off the radio entirely. About a half mile ahead, he spotted a rest pull-off and decided to stop. He needed to breathe, check the truck, maybe convince himself he was hallucinating from fatigue. The pull-off was empty, except for an old, rusted station wagon. No lights, no movement. But the driver's door was open. He stepped out of the cab, flashlight in hand. The air felt thicker, heavier. The silence wasn't natural. It was forced, like sound itself had been sucked out of the world. He approached the station wagon. Inside, on the passenger seat, was a small cassette recorder, still running, spools of tape spinning slowly. Mark picked it up, rewound. He hit play. The tape started with the sound of a man breathing heavily, maybe crying. Then the voice returned, that same 3-toned voice. But this time, it was singing, a lullaby. Words Mark didn't understand. The tune made his skin crawl, like it was activating something primal inside him. He dropped the recorder and ran back to his truck. But the truck's lights were off. They had been on a minute ago. Then, behind the windshield, he saw movement inside his cab. Something was sitting in the driver's seat. He couldn't see details, just a silhouette. But it was wrong. The proportions were stretched, neck too long, arms thin and bent backward like a mantis. And it was rocking, back and forth, slowly. He froze. Then the cab's headlights snapped on, blinding him. When they shut off, it was gone. The truck was empty, but something had written on the inside of his windshield. Words smeared in condensation. Drive faster. He got in and floored it. As he passed mile marker 48, the radio came back online with a burst of static, and normal trucker chatter returned. Everything felt normal, except for one thing. His dash cam, the one that records 24/7, had stopped recording exactly at 1:47 a.m. and resumed at 1:53 a.m. He never saw what happened in those 6 minutes, but he knew. He knew something watched him, something that wasn't supposed to exist. Mark never drove that route again. To this day, he wakes up at exactly 1:47 a.m., heart pounding, to the sound of clicking on his bedroom window. The Hollow Passenger. In the spring of 2006, a retired paramedic named Ellis was driving home late at night after visiting his brother, who lived 2 towns over. He took the Backroads, a network of winding 2-lane stretches that weaved through dense rural valleys in southern Oregon. Ellis knew the roads well. He had worked emergency calls here for over 20 years and had seen his share of wrecks, mostly from deer or sleep-deprived drivers. But nothing had prepared him for what happened on Bridge Hollow Road. It started around 2:13 a.m. Ellis had just passed a weathered wooden sign that read, "Now entering Thistle Bend." That's when he noticed the air inside his old Subaru turning cold. Not just chilly, refrigerated. His breath began fogging up the windshield, and the defrost couldn't keep up. Then the static started, not from the radio, which was off, but from somewhere behind him. At first, it sounded like distant white noise, but it quickly transformed into an unnatural warping, like tape being stretched too fast. The sound rippled through the car, metallic and sharp, vibrating Ellis's spine. He checked the rearview mirror. There was someone in the back seat. At first, he thought it was a reflection, but no, the figure was real, sitting bolt upright, silhouetted, unmoving. He slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop on the gravel shoulder. Ellis spun around. The seat was empty. Only, it didn't feel empty. The interior still carried the dense weight of a presence. The air was thick, heavy with something like ozone. And then he heard it, not outside the car, inside, a rattling inhale, like someone gasping through wet lungs, followed by a sound so alien, it made Ellis flinch, a modulated insectoid chittering, overlaid with the deep guttural humming. The closest thing he could compare it to was a baby monitor picking up demonic feedback, rapid glitching consonants, and gurgled vowels repeating over themselves. Then the voice came. He didn't scream, "But you will." It was right behind his ear. Ellis opened the door and threw himself out onto the dirt. The forest was silent, no crickets, no wind, only the sharp ringing in his ears and the echoes of that distorted voice still scratching inside his skull. He circled the car with his flashlight. No signs of entry. All doors locked, but the interior cabin light was flickering. On, off, on, off. He got back in slowly, turned the ignition, and the engine wouldn't start. Then something knocked on the driver's side window. Not tapped, knocked. 3 slow, deliberate raps. He turned. There was no one there, but in the fogged window was the outline of a handprint. 5 long fingers, but each finger ended in a split, almost like an insect's claw. The engine roared to life on its own. The headlights switched on, and in their beams, just 20 feet ahead, something was crossing the road. Ellis said it wasn't walking. It was hovering just an inch above the ground. A long, black, vaguely humanoid form, gliding sideways. Its head cocked at an unnatural angle, its mouth too wide, and constantly shifting, like liquid shadows trying to hold shape. Its arms dragged behind it like tendrils. And all the while, that same jittering filled the car again, louder now, echoing as if it were coming from inside his own skull. He drove, faster than he ever had. He didn't stop until he reached a gas station 30 miles away. When he got out, the attendant asked him something strange. "Sir, is there someone still in your back seat?" Alice turned. There was nothing, but the seatbelt was buckled. The exit that shouldn't exist. In late autumn of 2017, a long-haul trucker named Marcus Langley was driving through upstate New York on a delivery route that took him along the I-86. It was nearly 3:02 a.m., and he was in that peculiar zone between fatigue and wired alertness. The kind of days only diesel fumes, energy drinks, and white-line hypnosis could induce. He'd been on this stretch of highway dozens of times. He knew there wasn't an exit between mile marker 313 and 319. That stretch was flanked by dense forest and sheer rock faces, with no development, no service roads, nothing but trees and shadows. So when he saw the sign that read, "Exit 315, Finch Hollow," he nearly did a double take. He'd never heard of Finch Hollow. But more than that, there was something off about the sign itself. It looked old, not weathered, but dated, like it had been there since the 1950s, and somehow untouched by time. Curiosity overtook protocol. Marcus took the exit. What followed was a winding road, narrower than any standard off-ramp, that curved sharply down into a thicket of woods. His headlights caught glimpses of things between the trees, sagging wire fences, rotting mailboxes, and old cars buried in underbrush. But the strangest thing, every single house he passed had the same porch light, a dull yellow lantern, and each one flickered at the exact same interval. He slowed as he entered what looked like a main street, if you could call it that. The buildings were squat and dark. No signs, no names, just brick and boarded-up glass. Then his CB radio crackled to life, but it wasn't a voice. It was a shriek, high-pitched, metallic, inhuman. It sounded like a violin being dragged across rusted nails, looped with reverse whispers. Then came a low growl layered under it, shifting in pitch every second, like someone twisting a frequency knob back and forth with violent precision. Suddenly the truck stalled. The dashboard lights flickered. Marcus reached for his flashlight and stepped out into the freezing air. He'd barely made it 5 feet when he heard something skittering. Not an animal, something bipedal but not walking, running on jointed limbs, scraping against pavement in a rhythm that was wrong, like spider legs on concrete, with joints bending the wrong way. He spun the light toward the sound and caught a glimpse of something darting behind a building. It was tall, slender, but fast, unnaturally so. Then came the sound again, but this time from the truck, He turned. The passenger side door was open. He hadn't opened it. Marcus climbed back in, trembling. There was something in the sleeper cab. He could hear breathing, slow and wet, like something inhaling through a mucus-clogged throat. He pulled out his phone, but the screen was dead. Not low battery, just black, like it was off but still humming with static. His flashlight began flickering violently, and then, from behind him, came a voice, but not a human one. It was imitating a human, trying to sound like one. You came down a road with no return. Now you're part of the hollow. He whipped around, but saw nothing, until the truck's windshield began warping, bending inward as if something invisible was pressing its face against the glass from the outside. A massive shape, tall, angular, with pulsing veins of blue light running along its arms, materialized just long enough for Marcus to scream and floor the gas. The truck roared to life like it had never stalled, and the entire town, the buildings, the lights, the road, flickered once like a dying film reel and vanished. When Marcus found himself back on I-86, he was sobbing. There was no exit behind him, not even a shoulder where the sign could have been. He drove until sunrise. The man who knew my route. In the winter of 2017, Marcus, an overnight courier for a printing company, was making his usual delivery run through the stretch between Flagstaff and Sedona, Arizona. It was a winding, lonely drive, cutting through patches of pine forest and vast desert nothingness, all drenched in a thick, moonlit silence. He left Flagstaff around 1:45 a.m. with a thermos of coffee and the radio playing low jazz. The road was empty, save for the occasional reflection of a deer's eyes in the bushes. About an hour into the drive, Marcus noticed something strange. He passed a man walking along the side of the road. That wouldn't be too weird, except for one thing. The same man appeared again 10 minutes later, farther down the road, walking the same way, same posture, same jacket, same limp. At first, Marcus thought he was hallucinating from sleep deprivation. But then it happened again, and again. The fifth time, the man turned his head as Marcus passed. His face was long, pale, stretched like candle wax, and his mouth seemed too wide, pulled unnaturally into a strained smile. And his eyes, they didn't reflect the headlights. They absorbed them. Marcus's stomach turned. He sped up. 15 minutes later, the headlights caught something up ahead. A man. The same man, but this time, he was standing in the middle of the road, facing Marcus directly. Marcus slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched on the cold asphalt, and when the van came to a stop, the man was gone. No footprints, no figure, just a low-frequency humming, like a deep radio static mixed with the sound of a slowed-down heart monitor, bleeding into the silence through the van's slightly cracked window. Psst, shirk. It sounded almost sentient, like something imitating a machine it didn't understand. Marcus sat frozen for a few seconds, then floored the gas pedal. Just 5 miles from Sedona, his GPS went dead. No signal. The screen glitched, stuttered, and displayed 3 blinking words. Turn around now. That's when Marcus noticed the road ahead had changed. The familiar signs were gone. Trees that were never there had appeared, lining the road like sentinels. And then came the screeching. Not human, not animal. Like metal scraping against wet flesh over and over. It echoed across the trees like something ancient trying to call itself back into the world. The voice voice on the radio, still playing low jazz, suddenly cut out and said in a crystal clear voice, "You're not supposed to be here, Marcus." He hadn't told the app his name. He hadn't spoken a single word out loud. The road twisted sharply, revealing a figure standing in the center again. Marcus swerved, clipped a signpost, and crashed into a snowbank. When he opened his eyes, it was daylight. There was no snowbank, no trees, no signpost, and the van, parked later when Marcus checked the dashcam footage. It was all there until the first appearance of the man. Then the footage looped, 5 seconds, over and over, except in the background, barely visible, was a frame of the road behind him, and a figure sitting in the back seat, watching him. No face, just a black void with teeth. The wrong passenger. On a freezing winter night in 2014, Andy Ramirez, a rideshare driver, was making his way through the backroads of rural Oklahoma. The clock read 2:15 a.m., and light snow felt like frozen stardust under his headlights. The roads were empty, the air thick with a silence so heavy it felt like time itself had stopped. Andy got a pickup request from an unfamiliar location. No street name, just Hilltop Grove, Eastern Gate. He checked the map, but found nothing. Yet the app accepted the ride and plotted a strangely precise route. He hesitated, then decided to go. Maybe it was some local landmark. When he arrived, he found an old iron gate half open, leading to a narrow dirt road lined with dense pines. The place was unnaturally dark, as if even light feared to enter. He parked near the gate and started typing a message to his passenger. But before he could hit send, the back door opened and someone got in. Andy didn't look back, just asked, "Name's John." Silence, then a voice, hoarse, like it came from a broken speaker, answered, "Yes." Andy shivered. The voice sounded like it was learning how to speak. He tried to ignore it and started driving. Minutes passed without another word. The GPS showed no destination, just an endless moving arrow. When Andy finally asked again, "Where to?" the voice came back, slower this time, like a machine mimicking speech, going, "Home." Andy glanced in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, but he could hear breathing. Heavy, wet, not quite human, more like air being forced through a damaged pump. Between each exhale came a sound like "ke, ke," as if something was trying to laugh or clear its throat in a way no person could. Andy was braking, but he kept driving, desperate for the next gas station or house. Yet the road stretched on endlessly, the same trees repeating in a sick loop. Then, suddenly, the sound changed. From the back seat came overlapping whispers in different languages, speeding up, warping. Deutsch, Yarab, and the heart your heart doesn't know. Kss. Then, a scream, a piercing, glitchy shriek, like a radio drowning underwater. The sound short-circuited his thoughts. The car lurched to a stop. He hadn't touched the brakes. When he stepped out, he was standing in front of an old windowless house. The front door was slightly ajar. On the ground, footprints, not human. From inside came a noise like a reversed radio broadcast replaying every 2 seconds, mixed with a baby crying inside a glass tube. Then, silence. Andy looked at the back seat again, this time from outside the car. A massive wet stain soaked the upholstery, as if someone had sat there dripping. When he got back in, his phone suddenly worked again. The app displayed, "Ride complete. Thanks for using Hilltop." But he hadn't pressed anything, and there'd been no signal out here. He sped away in a panic. When he reported it to police later, they confirmed no neighborhood, road, or area called Hilltop Grove existed.